Imagine pulling into a charging station, plugging in your electric car, walking into the store, grabbing a coffee, and coming back to find your car fully ready to drive. Not half charged, not 80%. Ready, with over 600 miles of range ahead of you, and the whole stop took less time than it took you to decide which drink to order. That is not a scene from a promotional video. That is what is actually happening right now with a production car you can buy today. But here's the part that really stops you in your tracks. The reason this car charges that fast, covers that much distance, and performs that well in freezing cold weather has nothing to do with simply stuffing in a bigger battery. It is because the battery and the car have become one single thing. The floor you sit on, the walls around you, the very skeleton holding the vehicle together. All of it is the battery. A Chinese company just fundamentally changed the answer to the question, what is an electric car? And the story of how they got there starts not in some gleaming automotive headquarters, but in a single rented room with a handful of people and a plan to make batteries for mobile phones. If range anxiety, slow charging, or winter performance have ever made you hesitant about going electric, what you are about to hear is the video you have been waiting for. Like and subscribe before we dive in, because this one is worth sticking around for. The company is BYD, and their story begins in 1995 in Shenzhen, China. Wang Chuanfu started the business with very little capital and a clear-eyed view of where opportunity existed. Mobile phones were taking off across the world, and somebody had to supply the rechargeable cells that kept them running. BYD went after that market aggressively, building a reputation for producing high-quality batteries at prices that undercut almost everyone else. But what they were really building during those years was something more valuable than market share. They were building a deep, almost obsessive understanding of how batteries actually work. Every layer, every chemical reaction, every failure mode, they studied all of it. When BYD made the decision to enter the car business in the early 2000s, they did not think like an automaker. They thought like a battery company that needed a vehicle to wrap around their technology. That distinction sounds minor, but it changes everything about how decisions get made. Traditional manufacturers source batteries as a component and engineer the rest of the car around whatever they receive. BYD started from the cell and worked outward. By 2020, that philosophy led them to make a move the wider industry found puzzling. While most competitors were shifting toward newer, higher-energy battery chemistries, BYD doubled down on lithium iron phosphate, a chemistry most automakers had already written off as the less capable, lower-cost option. But BYD did not accept its limitations. Instead, they redesigned the cell from scratch. They made the cells long and flat like blades and arranged them edge to edge with no wasted space. No bulky intermediate casings, no unnecessary protective housing around clusters of cells. Just clean, dense, flat energy storage packed as tightly as physics allows. To demonstrate that the design was safe, they ran a fully loaded 46-ton truck over one of the battery packs. It did not catch fire, it did not leak, it barely deformed. The blade battery was a genuine step forward, but it was still, at its core, a separate module bolted beneath the car. The truly radical idea was still coming. Before we get to that, it is worth being honest about what has been holding electric vehicles back in the first place, because BYD was not solving problems in a vacuum. They were solving very specific, very real frustrations that millions of people feel every day. The most obvious one is charging time. The phrase fast charging gets used so freely in advertising that it has almost lost meaning. In reality, most public fast chargers take somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes to deliver a meaningful amount of energy. For anyone who grew up spending 5 minutes at a fuel station and driving away, that is a significant behavioral change. It affects how you plan journeys. It adds mental overhead that simply does not exist with a conventional car. Then there is range. The majority of affordable electric vehicles today offer somewhere between 250 and 300 miles under ideal conditions, which means mild temperatures, steady speeds, and light use of climate control. Take one into a serious winter and that range can shrink by a third or more. Cold temperatures slow down electrochemical reactions and the car has to burn additional energy just keeping the battery warm enough to function. Charging in cold weather is similarly painful. Many owners have sat at fast chargers in winter, watching the power trickle in at a fraction of normal speed while the car first brings the battery up to operating temperature. But the deepest structural problem is one that rarely appears in any advertisement. In virtually every electric vehicle on sale today, the battery is a heavy, passive box strapped under the floor. It stores energy and does nothing else. The entire vehicle has to be engineered around it the way you would design a house around a boulder you cannot move. That box adds weight without contributing anything to the car's rigidity or crash protection. More weight means more energy needed to move the car, which means you need a larger battery to hit the same range, which adds more weight. Still, it is a trap that the entire industry has been circling for years. And BYD decided that making incremental improvements to that fundamental layout was not a real solution. The layout itself had to go, and the question they asked was deceptively simple. What if the battery cells did not sit underneath the car, but were actually part of the car's structure? What if, instead of a box bolted to the bottom, the top surface of the battery cells became the floor of the passenger cabin, and the cells themselves acted as structural members, spreading load and absorbing force the same way steel beams do in a building? That is exactly what cell-to-body technology does. You are not sitting above a battery, you are sitting on it. The battery is the skeleton. Think about the difference between carrying a heavy backpack strapped to your back versus having the load distributed through your actual bones. One is an external burden the body compensates for, and the other is the body itself doing the work. And BYD made the battery do the structural work. The measured results are striking. BYD tested the body stiffness of vehicles using this approach and found it produced roughly 70% greater rigidity compared to their previous designs. That level of structural performance puts it alongside luxury cars costing several times more, vehicles that use exotic materials, and years of engineering to reach similar numbers. BYD reached it not by spending more, but by rethinking where the battery lives and what job it does. The efficiency gains are equally significant because the outer casing of a separate battery module is no longer needed. Approximately 76% of the total volume inside the system now consists of actual energy-storing cells. In older arrangements, a large portion of that space was occupied by protective housing, wiring channels, cooling infrastructure, and the structural walls of the battery box itself. Eliminate those layers and the same physical footprint holds dramatically more energy. That is why range numbers on BYD's newest models push past 600 miles, not because the battery is physically larger, but because far more of its space is now doing actual work. Less packaging also means less weight, and less weight means greater efficiency, which feeds back into range, and because the battery contributes directly to the car's rigidity, handling improves too. The stiffer body reduces flex during cornering, lowers vibration at highway speeds, and gives the whole car a more composed, planted feel. All of that engineering is impressive, but none of it is the number that genuinely silenced a room at BYD's reveal event in March 2025. That number was 5 minutes. Using a 1,500 kilowatt charger, roughly 40 times more powerful than a standard home unit, BYD system can go from 10% to 70% in 5 minutes. In their Seal 06 sedan, that 5-minute window delivers around 400 kilometers of driving range. Somewhere around 250 miles from a single stop shorter than most people spend reading messages after they wake up. That is not a top-up. That is not a safety buffer. That is a complete, confidence-giving charge that removes the last real friction point from long-distance electric travel, and winter, cold weather charging has always been the quiet deal-breaker for people in harsher climates. At minus 30 degrees Celsius, cold enough to make metal brittle, BYD says charging from 20 to 97% takes just 3 extra minutes compared to room temperature. 3 minutes, not 30, not double the time, 3 minutes. That is made possible through thermal management built directly into the cell-to-body structure, keeping the cells within their ideal operating range even when the outside air is genuinely brutal. The top-tier vehicle in this lineup is the Yangwang U7, BYD's full-size luxury sedan, which under Chinese testing standards is rated for over 1,000 kilometers on a single charge, and real-world numbers will vary depending on driving style and conditions. But even with a generous adjustment, and the figure remains exceptional by any current standard, a fast-charging car is only as useful as the network that supports it, and BYD recognized that long before they started selling vehicles with this technology. A 500-kilowatt charger cannot simply draw that level of power directly from the grid in real time without creating serious strain. BYD's solution is elegant. Each of their flash charging stations contains its own internal energy storage system. Throughout the day, the station draws power from the grid at a slow, steady rate that the infrastructure handles comfortably, and when a car pulls up, the station releases all of that stored energy at full speed. No grid spike, no delay. No compromise. It is the same logic as filling a water tower gradually and then opening the tap fully when someone needs it. The pressure was already built up. BYD had installed over 4,000 of these stations across China before the technology even went on public sale. The target is 20,000 stations by the end of 2026. That is not a roadmap with aspirational dates attached. That is infrastructure already being built. BYD sold over 4 million vehicles last year, spanning from a compact city car at around $22,000 to a six-figure performance flagship. Cell-to-body is not a feature reserved for one expensive model. It is a platform. And platforms scale into trucks, buses, delivery vehicles, and beyond. Every other automaker building electric vehicles is currently looking at what BYD has demonstrated and working out how far behind they actually are. Some have structural battery concepts of their own in development, but the combination of cell-to-body construction, 5-minute charging, cold weather performance, and a rapidly expanding dedicated charging network in a single production car is a package nobody else has matched yet. The bar just moved. And it moved a long way. If a 5-minute flash charger opened near your house tomorrow, would that finally be enough to make the switch? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.